Welcome back to True Crime with Christina. Warning: this episode contains graphic descriptions of child abuse, torture, and murder. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Tonight, I'm bringing you one of the most disturbing and heartbreaking stories I ever come across. It's the story of a quiet, gentle 16-year-old girl who put her trust in the wrong hands. And unfortunately, she ended up living her final weeks trapped in a nightmare that unfolded in the basement of a ordinary home in Indiana. A murder so vicious, so senseless, that it didn't just horrify the state, it echoed across the entire USA. And yet, to this day, many have never heard her name. This is the story of Sylvia Likens. Sylvia had a soft smile and kind eyes. She wore her sandy blonde hair just past her shoulders and was often described as a delicate looking little girl. She was sweet and really timid. She wasn't the type of person to stand out in a crowd, but to those who knew her, she was thoughtful, kind, and always ready to lend a hand, especially when it came to her little sister Jenny. The two girls were inseparable, and Sylvia often took a motherly role with her sister. She was comforting Jenny quite often when her polio braces made her feel out of place. Sylvia loved roller skating. It gave her a sense of freedom, a little escape. But she also enjoyed listening to music, writing in her journal, and watching movies at the local theater when she could afford it. She had a big imagination and loved reading stories about faraway places. Her life wasn't always easy. Her parents worked in a traveling carnival, which meant the family was often on the move. But Sylvia dreamed of something stable, something normal. She wanted to go to school regularly, make friends, and feel safe. Instead, she was left in the care of someone who was supposed to protect her, a woman who would become her torturer. And the people who surrounded her during those final weeks? Not strangers, not criminals, but neighborhood children. Kids who should have been her friends. Kids who laughed while she begged for mercy. Sylvia Likens didn't just fall through the cracks. She was pushed. And what happened to her remains one of the most cruel, shocking crimes in American history. Before talking about the crime, let's talk about her life. Sylvia Mary Likens was born on January 3rd, 1949, in the small town of Lebanon, Indiana. She was the third of five children in a family that lived a modest and predictable life. Her parents, Lester and Betty Likens, worked in a traveling carnival, selling candies, popcorn, soft drinks to crowds at local fairs. It was a hard life, ruthless and unstable. The family didn't have much, and what they did have often came and went with the seasons. Because of their work, Sylvia and her siblings were passed between relatives and neighbors while their parents hit the road to make ends meet. Sylvia never complained. She understood their situation. She was the kind of girl who carried burdens quietly and tried to make things easier for others. She had two older siblings, Diana and Danny, and two younger ones, Benny and Jenny. Jenny, her closest companion, had contracted polio at a young age and needed a brace to walk. Sylvia took care of her like her second mother. Whether it was helping her climb the stairs or brushing her hair before school, Sylvia was always by her side. Sylvia was going to Arsenal Technical High School. She was quiet in class, not particularly popular, but known for being respectful, polite, and shy. She wasn't a troublemaker. She just wanted a simple life, to be safe, to feel love, and to stay close to Jenny. But her parents' constant travel made that hard. They were trying to survive, and when the summer of 1965 came around, they once again had to leave. They couldn't bring the girls with them, so they did what they thought was best. Desperate to find a temporary guardian for their daughters, Sylvia's parents arranged for a woman named Gertrude Baniszewski to take them in. Gertrude was a pale, thin woman in her 30s with a tired face, deep set eyes, and a smoker cough. She lived in a worn down two-story house on East New York Street in Indiana with her seven children. The house smelled of mildew and cigarette smoke, and the furniture was stained and broken. The Lincolns family knew of Gertrude through their oldest daughter, Diana, who had met one of Gertrude's daughter at church. Gertrude promised to care for Sylvia and Jenny like they were their own. For $20 a week. It sounded reasonable, temporary, and safe. But that agreement, handshake simple, without any legal protection, was the moment everything began to unravel. That house, with its creaky floors and chaotic energy, would become a prison. And Gertrude, the woman who claimed she would watch over the girls, would turn into something monstrous. Sylvia did not know it yet, but she was walking straight into a trap disguised as kindness. At first, things were fine. Sylvia and Jenny slept on a thin mattress in one of the cluttered upstairs rooms, surrounded by piles of laundry, broken toys, and peeling wallpaper. The house was loud. Gertrude's children ran wild, shouting and fighting all the time. There was barely enough food for everyone, and what little they had was rationed carefully. Sometimes Sylvia and Jenny were given crackers or leftovers, and other times, nothing at all. Gertrude herself was constantly overwhelmed. She had seven children, no steady job, and was suffering from chronic health issues, depression, and what some later described as a deep resentment towards other women, especially young, pretty one like Sylvia. She spent her days chain smoking, lying on the couch, and taking prescription pills. Her moods swung widely from withdrawn silence to sudden rage. Sylvia's parents had promised to send $20 each week, but one week the payment was late, and that set Gertrude off. She snapped. She accused Sylvia of being the reason of her financial problems. She called her names, blamed her for things she had not done, and slowly the punishment started. At first, they were small, extra chores, being slapped here and there. Then it escalated. Gertrude beat Sylvia with paddles, belt, curtain rods. She encouraged her own children and even neighborhood kids to join in, to treat Sylvia like she was worthless, like she wasn't a human. They stubbed cigarettes out on her skin. They made her strip naked in front of strangers. They forced her to eat feces. They carved words into her body with needles and heated objects. She was denied food and water, and they locked her in the basement, where she was left to sleep naked on a concrete floor without a blanket. The basement became her prison, a dark, damp space where the only sound was her own breathing and the footsteps of her abuser coming back for more every single day. The worst part is, no one stopped it. Not the adults who occasionally visited the house, not the neighbors who heard her scream, not the children who were invited to participate in the abuse. Sylvia begged them, she cried, but each plea was met with cruelty and silence. I'm sure you're asking yourself, why didn't she run away? Why didn't she tell someone? Some say she was too afraid. Others believe that she was protecting her little sister who remained upstairs, scared, confused, and helpless. And maybe Sylvia still had hope that her parents would come back, that someone would notice, that someone would care. No one came in time. By late October 1965, Sylvia Likens was barely recognizable. Her once bright eyes were sunken, her body starved and covered in burns, bruises, open sores, and deep cuts. She weighed barely 84 pounds. She had been beaten, burned, mutilated, and broken emotionally and physically. On October 25th, 1965, after enduring weeks of unimaginable abuse, Sylvia couldn't take it anymore. She collapsed during a forced written session where Gertrude made her draft a letter to her parents, falsely claiming that she had run away with a group of boys and that they had assaulted her. Sylvia was trying to hold a pencil, but her hands trembled. Her last words, spoken softly to Gertrude, were, "I'm not going to make it." That evening, Sylvia lost consciousness in the basement. She never woke up. Gertrude ordered the children to bring Sylvia upstairs and place her on a soiled mattress. By then, her breathing was shallow, her lips were blue, and soon after, she died. Gertrude panicked. She told one of her sons to call the police. When officers arrived, Gertrude handed over the fake letter that Sylvia had written. But it didn't take long for them to realize that that was a lie. When officers saw Sylvia's body, they were stunned. Her corpse was covered in burns, deep bruises, gaping wounds, and punctures. The letters, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," had been carved into her abdomen with a heated sewing needle. Detective William Neff, one of the first officers on the scene, later said, "I'd been on the force for 15 years. I thought I seen it all, but nothing prepared me for that. And what they did to this poor little girl, it's the worst thing I ever seen." The autopsy revealed that Sylvia died from brain hemorrhages, shock, and malnutrition. There was also severe damage to her vaginal area, suggesting repeating assaults. Her fingernails were broken from trying to claw her way out of the basement. Jenny Likens, terrified but brave, pulled one of the officers aside and said, "You get me out of here, and I'll tell you everything." Jenny's testimony was the key that unlocked the case. She revealed the truth, the daily beatings, the torture in the basement, and the ways Gertrude involved her children and even neighborhood kids in the abuse. Police arrested Gertrude and her children Paula, 17, that was pregnant, Stephanie, 15, and John, 12, as well as two local boys, Coy Hubert and Richard Hobbs, both 15 years old. They were all charged in connection with the murder. During the questioning, the confessions came fast. John, 12 years old, admitted that he and the others had tied Sylvia up, beaten her, and watched as Gertrude starved her. Coy confessed to body slamming her and practicing judo move on her. Richard admitted to heating the sewing needle and carving into her stomach. But the most damning confession came from Paula, Gertrude's eldest daughter. She confessed to punching Sylvia in the face repeatedly and breaking her wrist in the process. Gertrude, however, continued to deny everything. She told the police, "I never laid a hand on her. The kids made it all up." But no one believed her. The trial began in April 1966 and lasted 6 weeks. It was one of the most publicized trials in Indiana's history. Deputy Prosecutor Leroy K. New described the home as a house of terror, a concentration camp in the middle of an American neighborhood. In court, Jenny Likens testified in a calm, steady voice, describing how Sylvia was beaten with broomsticks, burned with cigarettes, and made to sleep naked in the freezing basement. Dr. Charles Ellis, the coroner, testified that Sylvia had over 150 separate wounds on her body. He said there wasn't an inch of her that had not been bruised or cut. She was tortured systematically over time. It was a slow death. A psychiatrist testified that Gertrude was sane at the time of the crime, but likely suffered from depression and rage. The prosecution painted Gertrude as the ringleader, manipulative, cold, and sadistic. Leroy knew told the jury. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she used those children as weapons. The defense attorney tried to shift blame to the children, claiming Gertrude was too ill and frail to carry out such a torture. But the evidence was overwhelming. Now, the verdict and sentencing. On May 19, 1966, the jury returned its verdict. Gertrude, guilty of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison. Paula, the daughter that was pregnant, guilty of second-degree murder, she received a sentence of 7 to 21 years, but was released in 1972 after only serving 7 years. Richard, Coy, and John all were convicted of manslaughter and served less than 2 years in juvenile detention. Gertrude was paroled in 1985 after 20 years and changed her name to Nadine van Fossen. She died of lung cancer in 1990. People still ask, how could this happen in a neighborhood full of people? Why didn't anyone stop it? Teachers noticed Sylvia had bruises. Neighbors heard screams. One local minister even visited the house but didn't intervene. The truth is, everyone assumed that someone else would do something, but no one did. A plaque in the honor was later placed in Indiana. It reads, "This memorial is in honor of a girl who died tragically and without reason, and to remind us that we must protect the most vulnerable." Sylvia never made it out of that house alive, but her story, her voice, still lives. Thank you for being with me tonight. Until the next episode, be smart and always keep an eye open.